Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Mr. Ratner, you made a statement that you said boxers and MMA fighters are treated the same.
By commissions, yes.
So is the ranking system the same?
The ranking, first of all, I'm a regulator.
I know, but if you're saying they're treated the same, that's an awful broad statement.
Well,
Is the ranking system the same?
I'm saying from a regulatory point of view, from a commission point of view, they are.
Well, you're talking about the safety of the fighter. We're talking about the ranking, right. And the Ollie Act doesn't deal with the safety of it. It deals with the financial disclosures of it. So when you make that broad statement, let's be narrow, because this is a hearing on the legislation on H.R. 44. That's what this is about. We're not talking about the safety of it, which is important. We're talking about what the Ollie Act does and doesn't. So when you say that a boxer and an MMA fighter is treated the same, is the ranking system the same? Yes or no?
The ranking systems in boxing are completely different.
Okay, so what criteria does the MMA use for the ranking system? Does UFC specifically?
In the UFC, there's a group of sports writers, I'm not sure how many, and they are the ones...
Do they serve at will of the UFC?
They serve, no, they're independent.
They serve at will of the UFC. The UFC reserves the right to remove anybody off that commission that they choose.
I cannot answer that.
It's true. The answer to that is true.
I do not know that, but there's a group of them, it's 18 or 20, something like that, and they rank the fighters every
What
week
criteria do they
fight.
use to rank the fighters?
As I said, I am in the regulatory part of it. I'm not in that part of it, and I cannot answer that.
So, but you did refer to it. I mean, in your opening statement, you referred to the ranking system. So if you referred to it in your opening statement, then let's be clear on a couple of things. How do they choose who's going to fight for a title?
How does the UFC?
Yeah.
On a competitive basis, we make the fight that fans want to see.
I have no objections to that. I want that. But when you're talking about a world title, as a professional fighter, I want to know that I'm the best if I'm fighting. And that's the whole point. As Randy said, he wants to fight the best. So how do you know you get to fight the best? It's not has nothing to do with matchmaking. The Mayweather McGregor fight was not for a title. The fans wanted to see it.
Correct.
But when you have a title out there that the UFC shows as a world title, do you consider that the world title?
Last Saturday night, we had 3 world titles.
World titles. So when Lawrence Epstein came and talked to me, and he said that they don't look at the title as being in a title, but as an award bestowed upon the best fighter that night, would you agree with that statement?
I do. Just going back to Saturday night, we had...
So then it's not really a world title?
It's a world title as far as we're concerned.
Not if you're considering it an award bestowed upon the best fighter. It can't be. And when you have the last 3 fights at the 185-pound, as I said in my opening statement, when Luke fought Bisping was ranked number 4. To number 3, number 2, and the number 1 contender, did they refuse the fight? Like in the boxing world they do?
Well, in the boxing world, what you have there is step aside, and there's all kinds of games
Okay,
played.
but did they? Did number 3, 2, and the number 1 contender have an opportunity to fight, or did they go straight to Bisping?
I'm going to make it clear again, I am not involved in that part of it.
But you said it in the opening statement, and you said that the fighters and the MMA and boxers are treated the same.
Absolutely.
They are not when you're talking about the ranking system.
I'm talking about state commissions. I'm going to make it
State commission when you're talking about the safety and regulating the safety, but not the true ranking system. If the UFC is considered a professional sport, then it should be on merit-based ranking system when the fans know that number 1 contender actually has a shot at the title, because we haven't seen that at 185. How did Dan Henderson, which I like Dan, this is no knock on him, but he wasn't even in the top 10, and when was he in the last time in the top 10? He got to fight Bisping for the title shot. Did 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 all refuse?
When Dan Henderson fought Michael Bisping, it was a natural rematch from a fight maybe 4 or 5
But then it wasn't a title shot, but yet it was for a title shot.
For a title.
So then that means the world championship belt that the UFC has isn't really a world championship belt. It's really what Lawrence Epstein personally told me. It's simply an award that they bestow on the best fighter that night. That's insulting to every professional athlete. How did GSP get a fight for the title when he hasn't had a fight in 4 years, much less at 185 pounds, he never fought for the belt?
St. Pierre hadn't fought in 4 years. You're absolutely correct.
So how did he get a title shot?
He was a former champion, former pound for pound, the best fighter in the world, according to our.
So it's still, he still didn't fight for a title. He fought for an award bestowed upon the best fighter that night. When you go back and you say, and I'm wrapping up, Chairman, when you go back and you say that boxers are treated like MMA fighters, clarify that statement, that you're talking about the health of the fighter, but not the professional ranking system, and not about the financial disclosures, because there is distinct differences. And the Ali Act is the backstop to boxers. There is no backstop for MMA fighters. It's take it or leave it. And that's why I say the UFC has become the Don King of MMA. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has.
Mr. Ratner, a follow-up question. Did the UFC strip Conor McGregor of his featherweight title and drop him from the rankings despite he had never lost the title in competition?
He wasn't active in, I believe, the 145. He went up to 155, and yes, they took the title away.
And they stripped him out of the rankings of the top 10? Despite he had never lost at 145?
I believe so.
Right. What was that? Would that happen in boxing?
I think it has happened in boxing.
When they're inactive for how long?
That I cannot say, but I know.
Isn't it based on them passing fights, refusing to fight for the title? Isn't it based on criterias before they can just simply drop the title?
In boxing, there must be maybe 10 to 12 world sanctioning bodies, and they all have their own criteria. They all have different rankings.
But I'm talking about underneath the Ali Act, because you're a proponent for the Ali Act when it was coming out in boxing. You was a strong proponent for it. You're right, because you saw the need for the boxers, for the fighters. And a lot of it was the manipulation that was going on in boxing. Is that correct?
Yes, 20 years ago,
And you don't see any similarities right now on the manipulation, the way they do it?
No, I don't.
What about Nate Diaz, who was dropped from the UFC because he was involved in contract negotiations, and he was trying to negotiate with the UFC, and they dropped him? Is that not true?
I don't pay attention to the rankings, but
Sir, you're involved in it all the time. Was he not dropped from the UFC?
He's still under contract to us, and
I'm talking about at the time.
I'm sure you'll see him fight again.
I know that, but the answer to that is yes. And we go back to the same thing when you were saying that boxers are treated the same way as MMA, or MMA fighters are treated the same way as boxers. What I'm trying to draw here is they're not even close. You make a broad statement like that, you're misleading Congress.
Not at all.
And you're misleading the American people. When you make those statements, clarify specifically on what it is you're talking about, because once again, you're talking about the health of the fighter. The Ali Act deals with the financial compensation of the fighter. It also deals with a merit-based ranking system. I yield back.